Welcome to An Interview in History. Imagine a podcast that serves as a bridge across time, connecting listeners to the voices of history's most impactful figures. Each episode is a deep dive into the lives and legacies of these individuals, exploring not just their well-documented achievements, but also uncovering lesser-known facts that shaped their contributions to our world. From scientists who unlocked the mysteries of the universe to activists who fought for social change, each story is a testament to the indelible mark they left on society. This journey through history will not only educate, but also inspire listeners to appreciate the intricate tapestry of human progress. I'm your host, Steve Burek. This week we're talking with the 18th President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant. He was the commanding general who led the Union Army to victory in the American Civil War in 1865. This interview takes place on December 28, 1884. General Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start at the beginning. Could you tell us about your early family life?
Certainly. I was born on April 27, 1822, in Point Pleasant, Ohio. My father, Jesse Root Grant, was a tanner and a leather merchant. He was a hardworking, ambitious man, always trying to provide for our family. My mother, Hannah Simpson Grant, was a quiet, gentle woman who preferred to stay out of the limelight. I had 5 siblings, 3 brothers, Samuel, Orville, and Simpson, and 2 sisters, Clara and Virginia. We were a modest, close-knit family, and my parents instilled in us with the values of hard work and perseverance.
Well then, how about your schooling? What was your education like?
Well, to be honest, I never particularly fond of school. I attend local schools in Ohio, but I wasn't a standout student. I much prefer spending my time outdoors, especially working with horses. In 1839, my father secured me a place in the United States Military Academy at West Point. I didn't have a strong desire to go, but I figured it was a free education, so I went along with it.
Well then, what was your experience like at West Point?
West Point was a challenge, to say the least. I was an average student, graduating 21st in the class of 39 in 1843. I never excelled academically, but I was good at horsemanship, and which was something I enjoyed. The discipline and the structure of military life took some getting used to, but I made a few close friends there, including future Civil War figures like William T. Sherman and James Longstreet.
Well then, after West Point, you entered the military. Could you share some details about your early military career?
Of course. After graduating from West Point, I was assigned to the 4th U.S. Infantry and posted to various frontier outposts. My first significant experience was in the Mexican-American War, where I served under General Zachary Taylor and later General Winfield Scott. I gained valuable experience in leadership and logistics during the war, which would later serve me well during the Civil War. But after the war, I found peacetime military life rather dull. I was stationed at remote posts, and frankly, I miss my family terribly.
Well then, speaking of the family, let's talk about your marriage. How did you meet your wife, Julia?
Julia. I met Julia Dent in Missouri when I was stationed near her family's plantation. She was a sister in one of my West Point classmates. We fell in love quickly, but it wasn't easy to get her family's approval. After a long courtship, we married in 1848. Julie was the love of my life, a steadfast partner through the thick and thin. We had 4 children together, Frederick, Ulysses Jr., Ellen, and Jesse. My family was my anchor, especially during the difficult times.
Now let's shift to your involvement in the Civil War. What was it like leading Union forces during such a tumultuous time in American history?
Certainly, the Civil War was a defining struggle of my life, and I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish. One of my earliest significant stories was the capture of Fort Donelson in Tennessee in 1862. It was first major Union victory of the war, and it earned me the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant because of my demand for the enemy's complete surrender. That victory was crucial because it opened up the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers as Union supply lines, which allowed us to penetrate deeper into the Confederate South. Another pivotal moment was the siege of Vicksburg of 1863. Vicksburg was known as the Gibraltar of the Confederacy because of the strategic position along the Mississippi River. It took several months of relentless campaigning, but we eventually forced the city to surrender on July 4th, 1863. This victory, combined with General Meade's success at Gettysburg just a day early, marked a turning point in the war in the favor of the Union. But the Civil War was without a doubt the most challenging period of my life. At the start of the war, I was working in a leather goods store in Galena, Illinois. But when the conflict began, I rejoined the Army to serve the Union cause. I began as a colonel of the volunteers, but quickly moved up to the ranks due to some early success. The turning point was my appointment to lead the all-Union armies in 1864. My strategy was to apply constant pressure on Confederate forces, especially Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. It was a brutal campaign, especially in battles like the Wilderness and the Cold Harbor. But it was necessary to end the war, preserve the Union, and surrender Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865 was a moment of immense relief.
Your campaign in Vicksburg is often cited as one of the most brilliant military operations of the Civil War. Were there other campaigns you're particularly proud of?
Absolutely. After Vicksburg, I was given command of all Union armies in 1864. One of the most proudest achievements during that period was the overland campaign against General Robert E. Lee's Army of North Virginia. The campaign was grueling, involving fierce battles like the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor. Unlike previous Union generals, I didn't retreat after a battle, but it kept pushing forward, engaging Lee's forces relentlessly, knowing that the Union had more resources and manpower than the Confederacy. It was brutal, and we suffered heavy casualties, but it wore down Lee's forces at the point of exhaustion. This culminated in the siege of St. Petersburg, which eventually led to the fall of Richmond, the Confederate capital, at the surrender of Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, bringing the Civil War to the end and were perhaps the greatest accomplishments of my military career.
You were hailed as a hero after the Civil War. How did you transition from being a military leader to the President of the United States?
I never aspired to be president, but after the war, there was a lot of pressure for me to enter politics. I was seen as a unifying figure, someone who could help heal the nation. In 1868, I was nominated by the Republican Party and won the presidency. I served 2 terms from 1869 to 1877. My presidency has its challenges, particularly with Reconstruction and efforts to protect the rights of the newly freed African Americans. My administration also faced corruption scandals, which I regret, even though I was never personally involved.
What were you most proud of during your time in office?
Serving as President of the United States after the war was an entirely different kind of challenge, but I'm proud of several achievements. One of my greatest sources of pride was to work in supporting Reconstruction. My administration worked to protect the rights of newly freed African Americans. I advocated for the ratification of the 15th Amendment, which granted African American men the right to vote, ensuring civil rights for all citizens, regardless of race, was a case I deeply involved in. I also determined to suppress the violence of groups like the Ku Klux Klan, which were terrorizing black citizens in the South. In 1871, I signed the Ku Klux Klan Act, which allowed the federal government to intervene against these groups. We deployed federal troops to the South and succeeded in breaking the back of the Klan, at least for that time. I believe these efforts were crucial in giving African Americans a chance to exercise their newfound freedoms.
That was certainly a significant step forward in civil rights. Were there other initiatives from your presidency that stand out to you?
Yes, another accomplishment I am proud of my work toward fostering peace with Native American tribes. I implemented which was known as the peace policy. Instead of relying on solely on military force, I appointed Eli S. Parker, a member of the Seneca Nation, as Commissioner of Indian Affairs, the first Native American to hold the position. The idea was to reduce violence by promoting fair treatment and encourage Native tribes transition to reservation life with proper support. The policy wasn't perfect, but it was a step towards a more humane approach than previous administrations. I also made strides in foreign policy, particularly with the Treaty of Washington in 1871, which resolved long-standing tensions with Great Britain over issues like the Alabama claims. That treaty was not compensated the U.S. for damages caused by the British-built Confederate raiders, but also said my presidency had its flaws, but I also acted with the best intentions for the American people.
General Grant, it's been some time since the tragic assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Can you tell us how you first heard the news of his death?
I remember that evening vividly. My wife Julie and I were supposed to attend the play at Ford's Theater with President Lincoln and Miss Lincoln, but we had decided to travel to Burlington, New Jersey to visit our children. It was on that train that I received the news of the president's assassination. I was shocked and deeply saddened. I felt like a terrible dream, one that I deeply wanted to wake up from.
How did you react to the news, both personally and as the commanding general of the Union Army?
Personally, I was devastated. President Lincoln was not just a commander-in-chief, but a friend. We had worked closely during the war, and we had always been supportive, even in the difficult times. He had a kind and compassionate heart, and I admire his unwavering commitment to the Union. As a military leader, I had to immediately turn my grief into action. I knew the nation was at a critical juncture. The Civil War had just ended, and the country needed stability more than ever. My immediate concern was the possibility of further attacks or a resurgence of conflict, so I took measures to ensure security in Washington and other major cities.
What measures did you take to address the potential threats following the assassination?
I ordered increased security for government officials in key locations. We had to be vigilant. There were concerns that the assassination was part of a larger conspiracy to decapitate the government. The assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was still at large, and we didn't know how far his plans extended or who else might be involved. It was a chaotic and uncertain time, but we had to act swiftly to prevent further violence.
Then how did Lincoln's death affect the country's morale, especially since it came just days after the Union's victory?
The mood of the Union nation changed overnight. We had just celebrated the end of the war with General Lee's surrender at Appomattox. There was a sense of relief and hope for the future. Lincoln's assassination, however, plunged the country into mourning. It was as dark a cloud that had descended upon the nation. People had been rejoicing, and now were draped in black. It was a cruel twist of fate to lose a man who led us through such a tumultuous period just as we were on the brink of peace.
In your opinion, what would have been Lincoln's approach to Reconstruction if he had lived?
President Lincoln had a vision for lenient and compassionate Reconstruction. He wanted to bring the southern states back into the Union as smoothly as possible, without bitterness, harsh punishment. His goal was to heal the nation, not to deepen the wounds. He has spoken of malice towards none and charity for all. In his second inaugural address, I believe he would have been true to these words. He would have sought to rebuild the South, protect the rights of newly freed African Americans, and foster unity. Unfortunately, his death left many questions unanswered, and it was up to us to carry forward his legacy as best as we could.
How did you personally cope with the loss of President Lincoln?
It was difficult. I threw myself into my work. The weight of responsibility was heavier than ever, and I knew we had to move forward, both for the sake of the Union and to honor Lincoln's memory. I found solace in action and doing what would need to be done. My focus was ensuring a smooth transition, supporting Andrew Johnson, overseeing demobilization of our armies and the Reconstruction efforts.
You and Lincoln had a close working relationship during the war. What was he like as a leader?
President Lincoln was a remarkable leader, patient, thoughtful, and always willing to listen. I appreciated the confidence he placed in me, especially during the final year of the war. He never micromanaged the military strategy, but always offered his support. Lincoln had a deep sense of justice, a profound compassion for the common man. He had the strength to carry the nation through the darkest hours, and we are forever indebted to him.
Finally, General Grant, what do you think is President Lincoln's lasting legacy?
Lincoln's legacy in the preservation of the Union and the abolition of slavery. He believed in a united nation and worked tirelessly to ensure that it would not be torn apart. His dedication to the principles of freedom and equality changed the course of the history. Though he did not live to see the full realization of his vision, his leadership paved the way for a new era in America, one of hope, freedom, and possibly of true equality. We owe it to him to continue striving for the ideal.
After your presidency, you had some difficult years. Could you tell us about your life after leaving office?
After leaving the White House, I went on to a world tour with my family, visiting Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world. It was a remarkable experience, being treated like royalty abroad. But when we returned to the United States, I faced financial difficulties. I made some poor investments, particularly with brokerage firms, which led to my financial ruin. It was a hard blow, especially after a lifetime of public service.
Well, then during those tough times, you turned to writing. How did you become involved with Mark Twain?
Mark Twain is a true friend in my later years as I struggled with throat cancer. I needed to secure my family's financial future. Twain encouraged me to write my memoirs and even helped me get a publishing deal.
Your memoirs are considered one of the best of their kind. How do you feel about your legacy today?
I'm proud of what I accomplished, both on the battlefield and as a president. I did my best to unite the country and protect the rights of all citizens, despite the challenges and criticisms I faced. I'm grateful that my memoirs have allowed future generations to understand the complexities of the era and my role in it. I hope my story serves as a reminder of the importance of perseverance, duty, and service to one's country.
General Grant, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey with us. It's been an honor to hear your story.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to reflect on my life filled with both triumphs and trials.
President Grant died in the Mount McGregor cottage on July 23, 1885. Sheridan, then commanding general of the Army, ordered a day-long tribute to Grant on all military posts, and President Grover Cleveland ordered a 30-day nationwide period of mourning. After private services, the Honor Guard placed Grant's body on a funeral train, which traveled to West Point and New York City. 250,000 people viewed it in 2 days before the funeral. Tens of thousands of men, many of them veterans from the Grand Army of the Republic, marched with Grant's casket drawn by 24 black stallions to Riverside Park in Morningside Heights, Manhattan. His pallbearers included Union Generals Sherman and Sheridan, Confederate Generals Simon Bolivar Buckner and Joseph E. Johnston, Admiral David Dixon Porter, and Senator John A. Logan, the head of the Grand Army of the Republic, following the casket in the 7-mile-long procession where President Cleveland, 2 former living presidents Hayes and Arthur, all of the president's cabinet, and justices of the Supreme Court. Attendance at the New York funeral topped 1.5 million. Ceremonies were held in other major cities around the country, while Grant was eulogized in the press. Grant's body was laid to rest in Riverside Park, first in a temporary tomb, and then on April 17, 1897, in the General Grant National Memorial known as Grant's Tomb, the largest mausoleum in North America. And now, another forgotten history. Did you know Las Vegas owes its location to a curious scout who ventured where other Westerners hadn't? The statue of Rafael Rivera once greeted visitors at Old Vegas, an amusement park in Henderson, Nevada, back in 1978. While the park has disappeared into memory, Rivera's role in shaping Las Vegas remains significant. In 1829, as part of Antonio Armijo's Spanish Trail expedition, Rivera broke away from the group to scout for water on his own, and struck gold in the form of the Las Vegas Springs. His discovery of the valley's abundant water not only shortened the Spanish Trail to Los Angeles, but also paved the way for the desert oasis to what it is today. By the time John C. Fremont camped there in 1844, Rivera's discovery had already set the stage for the vibrant city that would later rise up in the 20th century. History may not always be marked with grand monuments, but it's written in every place we call home. You can still see the statue today at the Rafael Rivera Park beside the Community Center in Las Vegas. Join us next week as we talk with that famous lawman, Wyatt Earp. Until then, take care.